Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, speaking from the Muslim Media Hub. I'm glad to speak with you today about our series entitled Faith and Doubt, 30 Big Questions About Belief. The question we're going to address today is about alcohol and pork. Why does Islam prohibit these items? So the Quran mentions four things that are prohibited for people to eat. This is mentioned in the second chapter of the Quran, the fifth chapter of the Quran, the sixth chapter of the Quran. You see, it's repeated. And in the list, we have the flesh of swine, lahm al-khinzir. And it is interesting, by comparison, to notice that in the New Testament, it is mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles that when there was a dispute among the early preachers of Christianity as to what was to be done with Gentiles, the council in Jerusalem ruled that it should be said to the Gentiles that they are to stay away from four things. Interestingly enough, the flesh of swine is not mentioned there, but we know from elsewhere in the Bible that the flesh of swine was to be prohibited, and of course was declared prohibited in the books of Deuteronomy and Leviticus, and there even some passages in Isaiah reflect on approvingly of those prohibitions. The dietary laws were there in the Old Testament and also continue to be seen to be applicable in the New Testament, though the New Testament does not specifically label pork as a prohibited item. But in general, the law was to be kept. And of course, Jewish Christians had to continue abiding by the law. And Paul himself declared himself to be a Pharisee of Pharisees. And he was saying with regards to the law, he's blameless, which means that he himself continued to observe the law. And he too must have refrain from eating pork, as would have the disciples of Jesus that came with him from Galilee. They were of Jewish origin, and so they would have maintained the Jewish laws. And to this day, there are Jewish Christians, and I would expect that many of them would retain their Jewish roots by observing, among other things, the dietary laws which are there prescribed in the Old Testament. And of course, Jews who are following the old, what they call the Tanakh or the Hebrew scriptures, would maintain the same law along with Muslims by not eating pork. Why was pork prohibited in the first place? It may be because pork comes with certain health risks. There's some benefits, of course, in eating meat, and especially pork, but also a lot of unique harms that come with eating pork. Now, in modern times, with modern farming processes and with proper refrigeration and cooking methods, especially at high heat, these harms are mitigated to a certain extent, but still there are harms which are associated with this, and one can go to Healthline, for example, and find an article there regarding some of the harms from eating pork. Now, at the time when it was prohibited, both in the Old Testament and then subsequently in the Quran, at that time people did not have these facilities, and of course pigs were scavengers, so they would eat waste, and by consuming such waste they might ingest substances which are harmful to humans when passed on through their meat. Also, there might be a psychological benefit attached to this, in that when people say you are what you eat. So perhaps if people thought of the thing that they're eating as being a scavenger, being the thing that consumes all waste, then one might think of themselves too as being nourished by the same sort of waste products. But of course, modern farming and so on mitigates that to a certain extent. But I'm explaining why historically this might have been the reason why God has prohibited it in the first place. Now, one might ask, well, in modern times, if we can mitigate the harms, then what's wrong with eating pork? Well, for Muslims, there are so many other things that we can consume that are clearly permissible in the religion. We're not stuck so that we have to be in a situation to say, well, wait a minute, we don't have anything else to eat. Can we at least eat the pork? In fact, in Islamic law, it is well known in principle that if people are forced to the point of starvation, usually it is said, then one can actually consume even the things which are generally thought to be haram. In fact, even the Quran says, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. Whoever is forced by circumstance, whoever is compelled by necessity, then there is no sin on that person, providing that the person does not return to it unnecessarily and does not, desire to have it. So you just use it as per necessity, but you don't overuse it, you don't reuse it, and you don't desire it. So you see, the Quran already is a very practical book of instructions dealing with the real situations in life and giving allowances for such real situations. Now, let's come to alcohol consumption. Alcohol consumption in our modern times has been met with varying studies. Some studies at one time had shown that if you consume some types of alcohol, like for example red wine, in moderation, then this could actually have some health benefits, like you drink 1 glass per day or something like this. But more recent studies have shown that in fact any amount of alcohol consumed can have detrimental effects. And this is why recently Health Canada has ruled that rather than say that this much is allowed and so on, or this much is safe, Health Canada is now saying, as I understand it, that no amount of alcohol is safe to be consumed, but the less you consume, the better, and the more you consume, the worse it is for you. So the bottom line is that it is better to stay away from alcohol. So much for the health issues, but there are other practical considerations. Using alcohol can have many disadvantages for people in particular and for societies in general. For people in particular, the person who drinks may think, okay, I'm just drinking a little, but they may soon get addicted and they may not know when to stop, and so they may continue consuming. This causes harm to the individual in terms of health. It can lead to certain cancers. It can lead to many health issues and diseases. If a woman is pregnant, drinking alcohol can be detrimental to her and also to her unborn baby. Babies are sometimes born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and if people drink, sometimes it has detrimental societal effects. Harms are caused through accidents, and there are instances of domestic abuse that are clearly linked to alcohol consumption. Oh, the list of harms goes on and on. And for this reason, we thank God that He has given us this regulation in the Quran that prepares Muslims to be teetotalers, so that it's off limits for us. We're not going to touch it, and therefore, we don't have this problem of not knowing when to stop. We just stop right at the very beginning. We don't even start. Surah 5, verse number 90, it says that of these items, the drinking, gambling, and so on, these are the handiworks of Satan. So we are to avoid this altogether so that we may be successful. And this is what Muslims try to do. Now, one might look at it and say, man, Islam is so harsh about things like this. Can't I enjoy myself? Well, it's not only Islam. In fact, it is probably interesting for some to know that there are in some other religious traditions as well some distancing from alcohol. Buddhism in particular has 5 precepts, and 4 of those are known from the Old Testament. They're the 4 of the 10 commandments about staying away from adultery, from murdering, from stealing, from false witness. But then the 5th precept, surprisingly, is to stay away from alcohol, which ranks right up there with the biblical 10 commandments in Buddhism. Of course, practices may vary between, among practitioners of Buddhism and from sect to sect and so on. But this is one of the 5 precepts. In Hinduism, there is also a sense, especially by those who are traditional Hindus that alcohol is bad for you, and so it is avoided by them as well. Among Jews, there is, of course, the Pesher, the Passover meal, which includes using wine, but many Jews may feel today that they could actually substitute grape juice for the wine, and they can still participate in that traditional ritual. In fact, in some Orthodox Jewish circles, the abstinence from alcohol is a principle. Among Christians, there is the communion or fellowship or the Eucharist, which is observed, and one of the items in the Eucharist is a little thimble full of like a glass that is the size of a thimble that would contain wine or grape juice in some circles, and that would be consumed. And the Bible prohibits drunkenness, or at least discourages it strongly, or speaks out against it, disparages it. But there are some Christian groups that are known for their abstinence from alcohol. Some Baptists, for example, and Methodists, and also Seventh-day Adventists. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints also practice abstinence. That church practices abstinence from alcohol as well. So Muslims are not alone in this, but one does not have to be a person of faith to recognize that there are great harms from the consumption of alcohol and to stay away from it. We've mentioned some of the harms already: the harms to the person, harms to society, harms within the family, harms to health, and so on. Not to speak of the waste of money and all of that. In short, people may drink alcohol because they feel that it gives them a sense of calm, or maybe helps them to forget their worries and so on. But Muslims can find such comfort in reading the Quran, in praying before God, and meditating, and so one does not need to turn towards alcohol, and it's better therefore to avoid all of the harms and to please God, following God's commandments, both in terms of abstinence from pork and abstinence from alcohol. Why does the Quran prohibit pork and alcohol? Probably because of the harms, especially in the case of pork in ancient times, and with alcohol both in ancient and modern times. More so, the Quran is cultivating in Muslims a higher sense of purpose, of well-being, of self-esteem, so that the Muslim feels, I don't eat that sort of thing, and I don't touch that sort of thing, I don't drink that. So the Muslim has a great sense of self-esteem and preservation of the human body, the human mind. Now, speaking of the human mind, alcohol is called khamr in Arabic, and khamr is a word that's derived from the same root from which the woman's head cover, khimar, is derived, and it is thought that alcohol clouds or covers the intellect, and the intellect for a Muslim is one of the greatest gifts of God. We want to preserve the intellect. So it is thought that alcohol is prohibited because it clouds the human judgment. And likewise, anything else that will intoxicate the person is likewise prohibited according to the rulings of Muslim scholars. So you can see the spirit behind it is not to deprive human beings of enjoyment, but rather to preserve the intellect so that we could have enjoyment by using the intellect. Not only would we walk straight and drive straight, but we could enjoy the fruits of an active intellect that is unclouded, a judgment that is sane and that is rational. That's all for today. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, signing off from the Muslim Media Hub. Join me again tomorrow for another big question within the series of 30 questions about faith and rationality. The question tomorrow that we'll be addressing is, why does Islam seem to have so many rules? So join me again for that. Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum.
Tired of seeing how Muslims are portrayed in the media? You can help. Support Muslim Media Hub, the first of its kind to empower young people to produce content for film, TV, and social media. Be part of our journey at muslimmediahub.com.